The orc woman stood in the pre-dawn cold with her daughter's hand tucked into hers, watching golden light spill from the bakery windows across the muddy street. Inside, human families gathered around wooden tables, tearing apart steaming loaves and laughing in ways that made their whole bodies shake. Jorani Thorne had been coming to this spot for 3 weeks now, always before the sun fully rose, always staying on the far side of the glass where the fog from the ovens made the scene look like something from a dream she was not meant to enter. Della, her daughter, pressed her nose against the window, her breath adding to the condensation. The girl was 6 years old, small for an orc child, with green skin a shade paler than Jorani's own and tusks that had only just begun to show beneath her upper lip. She wore a patched wool dress that Jorani had sewn from fabric traded for smoked fish, and her pointed ears poked through dark hair that Jorani braided each morning with careful fingers. "Mama, it smells so good," Della whispered, and Jorani felt her heart twist. They lived in a cottage at the edge of Milford, a frontier town that sat where the forest met farmland, where humans came to start over, and orcs were tolerated as long as they kept to the margins. Jorani's husband had died 2 winters past, caught in a snowstorm while hunting, and she had learned to survive alone with skills passed down through her clan. She could trap and fish, tan leather and smoke meat, but what she loved most was baking. Her grandmother had taught her the old ways, the dense hearth loaves that could sustain a warrior for days, the sweet festival breads studded with dried berries, the flatbreads that puffed over an open flame. But there was no market for orc bread in Milford. Jorani had tried once, bringing a basket to the town square, and the silence that had fallen over the human vendors had told her everything. One woman had made a sign against evil. A man had turned his children away. Jorani had walked home with every loaf still in her basket and had not tried again. So instead, she came here to watch through the glass. She told herself it was foolish, that standing in the cold served no purpose, but something about seeing those families together, seeing the way they broke bread and shared it, filled a hollow place inside her. It reminded her of her own clan gatherings before the wars had scattered them, before her people had become wanderers and outcasts. Inside the bakery, a man moved between the tables with easy confidence. Jorani had learned his rhythms over these weeks of watching. He was tall, with broad shoulders and strong arms that came from years of kneading dough. His hair was brown and slightly messy, as though he never quite found time to comb it, and his face had laugh lines around the eyes that suggested he smiled often. He wore a flour-dusted apron over simple clothes, and he moved through the crowded bakery like a man who belonged exactly where he was. His name, she had learned from overhearing conversations, was Benedict Sawyer. The bakery had been in his family for 2 generations, though from what she could gather, he ran it alone now. He seemed to know everyone who came through his door, greeting them by name, asking after children and crops and ailments. He had a way of making people feel welcome that Jorani envied. She had caught him looking at her once, 3 days ago. She had been standing at the window as usual when he had glanced up from serving a customer, and their eyes had met through the foggy glass. His expression had shifted, surprise giving way to something she could not name, and then a customer had demanded his attention, and the moment had passed. Jorani had hurried away, her heart pounding, certain she had overstayed whatever invisible welcome the window afforded her. But she had come back the next morning and the next because she could not help herself. "Mama, can we go inside?" Della asked, her voice small and hopeful. Jorani squeezed her daughter's hand gently. "Not today, little one." "But why?" "I am hungry and it smells so good and there are other children in there." "Because we are not the same as them," Jorani said, trying to keep her voice even. "They would not want us in their space." Della's face fell, and Jorani hated herself for putting that disappointment there, but what else could she say? The truth was a bitter thing, but it was still the truth. She had learned long ago not to push where she was not wanted, not to risk her daughter's safety or dignity on the hope that humans might see past green skin and tusks. The door to the bakery swung open and Benedict Sawyer stepped out into the cold morning air. He was not wearing a coat despite the chill, and steam rose from his skin where the warmth of the ovens still clung to him. He looked directly at Jorani and Della, and for a moment, Jorani considered fleeing, pulling her daughter away and disappearing down the street before he could say whatever cutting thing he had come out to say. But she had her pride, what little remained, and she would not run like a frightened animal. She straightened her spine and met his gaze, ready to defend her right to stand on a public street even if she could not enter his establishment. Benedict walked toward them with purpose, crossing the muddy street in a few long strides. Up close, he was even more handsome than he had seemed through the glass, with kind eyes the color of summer honey and a smile that started slowly but spread until it transformed his whole face. "Morning," he said, and his voice was warm and rough like fresh baked bread. "I am Benedict. You have been coming by most mornings." Jorani felt her throat tighten. "I apologize if we have caused offense. We will move along." "Offense?" Benedict looked genuinely confused. "Why would you think that? We were looking in your windows." "Well, that is what windows are for, I suppose." He smiled, then crouched down so he was at Della's eye level. "Hello there. What is your name?" Della looked up at Jorani for permission, and Jorani gave a slight nod. "Della," the girl said shyly. "That is a lovely name." "Are you hungry, Della?" The girl nodded, her eyes wide. Benedict stood and looked at Jorani again, and there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. It was not pity, which she had learned to recognize and despise. It was not curiosity, like she was some exotic creature to be examined. It was something softer, something that looked almost like longing. "I have been watching you watch," he said quietly, as though confessing something. "Every morning for weeks now. You stand out here in the cold, and you look through the glass like you are seeing something precious, and it has been driving me to distraction." Jorani did not know what to say. Her hands trembled slightly, and she clasped them together to hide it. "I kept thinking," Benedict continued, "that I should come out and say something, but I did not want to presume. I did not know if you would want to come inside or if I would be overstepping to ask. But this morning I woke up and I thought, to hell with it, I cannot spend another day with this glass between us." He gestured toward the bakery, toward the door that still stood open, spilling warmth and the scent of fresh bread into the street. "Would you please come inside, both of you? Be my guests. I would be honored to share my bread with you." Jorani's first instinct was to refuse, to protect herself and Della from the inevitable disappointment. But Della was looking up at her with such hope, and Benedict was standing there with his hand outstretched, not quite touching her but offering something nonetheless, and Jorani found she did not have the strength to say no. "Yes," she said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "Thank you." Benedict's smile blazed bright enough to rival the sunrise. He led them across the street and held the door open, ushering them inside with a gentle hand on Jorani's back that sent unexpected warmth through her whole body. The bakery was everything it had seemed through the glass and more. The air was thick with the smell of yeast and butter and cinnamon, and the heat from the ovens in the back made Jorani's cold cheeks tingle. Wooden tables were scattered throughout the space, most of them occupied by families finishing their breakfasts. Shelves along the walls displayed loaves of various sizes and shapes, their crusts golden and cracked in ways that made Jorani's fingers itch to touch them. The conversation died as soon as they entered. Every face turned toward them, and Jorani felt the weight of those stares like physical things. She saw a woman pull her child closer. A man's hand moved to the knife at his belt. The silence stretched, heavy and thick, and Jorani prepared herself for the words that would send them back out into the cold. But Benedict stepped forward, his voice carrying easily through the quiet space. "Everyone, these are my guests, Jorani and Della Thorne. I expect you all to make them feel welcome." It was not a request. It was a statement, delivered with the quiet authority of a man who knew his worth and his place. The tension eased slightly, though wariness remained in many eyes. People turned back to their meals, though Jorani noticed more than a few continued to watch from the corners of their vision. Benedict led them to a small table near the window, the very window through which Jorani had watched so many times. He pulled out a chair for her with old-fashioned courtesy, then did the same for Della. "Wait here," he said. "I will bring you something special." He disappeared into the back, and Jorani sat stiffly in her chair, acutely aware of every glance, every whisper. Della, bless her, seemed less affected, her attention captured by the family at the next table where two human children were playing a hand game between bites of bread. Benedict returned with a wooden board laden with food. There were thick slices of bread still warm from the oven, a crock of butter that had been whipped until it was cloud soft, a pot of honey, and several pastries dusted with sugar. He set it all down with a flourish and pulled up a chair to join them. "Try the honey bread first," he suggested, selecting a slice and spreading butter on it with sure movements. "It is my grandmother's recipe. She swore the secret was in adding a bit of milk to the dough, but I think it is actually in the temperature of the oven. You have to catch it at just the right moment, or the honey caramelizes wrong." He handed the slice to Della, who took it with both hands and bit into it eagerly. Her eyes went wide and a sound of pure delight escaped her. "Mama," she said around her mouthful, forgetting her manners in her excitement. "Mama, it is so good." Jorani accepted a slice from Benedict, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. She bit into it and had to stop herself from making the same sound her daughter had made. The bread was perfect, the crust crackling between her teeth while the interior remained soft and almost sweet. The honey had indeed caramelized just right, creating pockets of concentrated flavor that burst on her tongue. "This is excellent," she said, and it came out more emotional than she had intended. "You are a skilled baker." "Thank you." Benedict looked pleased, a faint color rising in his cheeks. "I had good teachers. My father and grandfather both worked these ovens before me. They taught me that bread is more than just food. It is comfort, it is community, it is the thing that brings people together." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "That is why it has been bothering me so much, seeing you outside. Bread is meant to be shared. Having you out there, looking in, felt wrong. Like I was failing at the most basic part of what this place is supposed to be." Jorani did not know how to respond to that. She had spent so long being treated as less than, as unwelcome, that this casual kindness from a human stranger felt almost dangerous. She wanted to accept it at face value, but some part of her waited for the other shoe to drop, for the moment when he would reveal this was all some elaborate cruelty. But Benedict just smiled and pushed the board closer, encouraging her to eat more. "Tell me about yourselves," he said. "How long have you been in Milford?" 2 years, Jorani said. "We came here after my husband died. His clan was to the north, but they moved on after he passed, and I did not wish to go with them. I wanted something stable for Della, a place where she could grow up without constantly traveling." That must have been hard, losing your husband and your community all at once. Jorani nodded, surprised by how easily he seemed to understand. It was. But we manage. I hunt and trap, trade what I catch for other goods. We have a cottage at the edge of town. It is small, but it is ours. And you are not lonely out there. The question was gentle, but it landed like a blow. Jorani looked down at her plate, at the crumbs of excellent bread scattered across it. Sometimes, she admitted, but that is the nature of things. It does not have to be, Benedict said quietly. Before Jorani could figure out what he meant by that, a customer approached the table, an older woman with suspicious eyes. "Benedict," she said, her voice cold. "A word, please." Benedict's jaw tightened slightly, but his smile remained in place. "Of course, Mrs. Gable. Excuse me a moment." He rose and walked a short distance away with the woman, but they did not go far enough to prevent Jorani from hearing their conversation. Her orc hearing was sharper than humans realized. "What are you thinking, bringing them in here?" Mrs. Gable hissed. "You know what people will say." "I am thinking that they were hungry and standing in the cold, and I have more than enough bread to share," Benedict replied, his voice level but firm. "That girl is an orc, her mother too. You cannot just invite them to sit among decent folk like they are the same." "They are not the same, you are right. They have shown more grace and dignity in the past 10 minutes than you are showing right now." Mrs. Gable made a shocked sound. "I have been a customer of your family's bakery for 30 years. My money is as good as anyone's." "It is, and you are welcome here same as always. But so are they. If that is a problem for you, you know where the door is." The woman sputtered, her face going red, but Benedict simply turned and walked back to the table, leaving her standing there. He reclaimed his seat and reached for a pastry as though nothing had happened. "I apologize for that," he said, not looking at Jorani directly. "You should not risk your customers on our account," Jorani said carefully. "We can leave if it causes you trouble." "No," Benedict's voice was firm. "You are not leaving. I meant what I said before. I cannot stand another day with glass between us. If people have a problem with you being here, that is their issue to sort out, not yours." Della had finished her bread and was eyeing the pastries with obvious desire. Benedict noticed and pushed one toward her with a wink. "Go on, take it. Growing children need their sweets." They stayed for another hour, and slowly the atmosphere in the bakery shifted. A few more customers left, shooting dark looks as they went, but others seemed curious, and one farmer even nodded politely to Jorani as he passed their table. Della made friends with the children at the neighboring table, showing them a stone she had painted with berry juice, and their mother watched with an expression that gradually softened from wariness to something almost like acceptance. Benedict talked easily throughout it all, asking Della about her favorite games and telling stories about mishaps in the bakery, the time he had forgotten to add salt to an entire batch of bread, and only realized when customers started complaining. The time a cat had gotten into the flour storage and left paw prints everywhere. The time his grandfather had fallen asleep in front of the oven and nearly burned the whole building down. His stories made Della giggle and even brought a smile to Jorani's face, something that had been rare these past 2 years. When they finally rose to leave, Jorani tried to offer payment, pulling out a few small coins from her pouch. Benedict waved them away with a firm shake of his head. "Absolutely not. You were my guests. Besides, seeing that look on your daughter's face when she tasted the honey bread, that was payment enough." "Then I am in your debt," Jorani said formally, inclining her head in the manner of her people. "No debt. But I would like to see you again if you are willing. Come back tomorrow morning, or any morning you like. The door will always be open for you." Jorani met his eyes and saw sincerity there, along with that same unnamed emotion she had glimpsed earlier. It made something flutter in her chest, something she had thought died with her husband. "We will come," she promised. Benedict's smile could have lit the whole bakery. "Good. I will look forward to it." He walked them to the door and held it open as they stepped back into the morning, which had grown bright and cold while they were inside. Della waved enthusiastically as they left, and Benedict waved back, still standing in the doorway until they turned the corner and disappeared from view. As they walked home through the waking town, Della chattered excitedly about the bread and the children and the nice man who had been so kind. Jorani listened with half an ear, her thoughts tangled around the morning's events. She felt off balance, as though the world had tilted slightly and she had not yet found her footing. Benedict had been so easy with them, so welcoming, and part of her was terrified by how much she wanted that to be real, to be lasting. She could not afford hope. Hope was a luxury that led to heartbreak. But as Della skipped ahead, humming a tune she must have heard in the bakery, Jorani felt hope blooming in her chest anyway, stubborn and wild as a weed. They returned the next morning and the morning after that, and soon it became routine. Benedict always had something special waiting for them: fresh cinnamon rolls one day, buttery croissants the next, thick slices of sourdough with jam made from wild berries. He never asked for payment, though Jorani tried repeatedly to offer it. Instead, he asked about their lives, their days, their small joys and frustrations. He seemed genuinely interested in everything they said, and Della began to light up whenever she saw him, running ahead to claim their usual table by the window. Other customers grew accustomed to their presence. Some remained cold, but others began to nod in greeting, and one woman even complimented the embroidery on Della's dress, which Jorani had painstakingly stitched during long winter evenings. It was not acceptance, not truly, but it was less hostility than Jorani had encountered in most places, and she found herself relaxing degree by degree. Benedict made it easy to relax around him. He had a gift for conversation, a way of drawing people out without seeming intrusive. Jorani learned that he was 32 years old, that he had taken over the bakery from his father 5 years ago when the older man's health had failed, that he had a younger sister who had married a merchant and moved to a coastal city. He loved his work, but sometimes felt lonely running the bakery alone, missed having family to share it with. "My father always said a bakery should be loud," Benedict told her one morning while Della played with a set of carved wooden animals he had brought for her. "Full of voices and laughter and people arguing about whether the rye bread is better than the wheat. When it is just me and the ovens, it gets too quiet, makes me think too much." "And what do you think about?" Jorani asked. Benedict was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "All sorts of things. Whether I am doing right by my family's legacy, whether I will spend my whole life alone in this building, whether there is more to the world than flour and yeast and the same routines day after day." He focused on her suddenly, his honey-colored eyes intense. "What do you think about when you are alone?" "I think about survival mostly. Making sure Della has enough to eat, that our cottage stays warm through winter, that we are safe." Jorani hesitated, then added more softly, "And sometimes I think about the past, about my grandmother and the clan gatherings when I was young. We would bake together, all the women, and the smell would fill the entire camp. There was this one bread we made for festivals, dense and dark with molasses and spices. It took 2 days to make properly, but it was worth it." "That sounds wonderful," Benedict said, and he sounded almost wistful. "I would love to taste bread like that someday. Perhaps I could make it for you in trade for all these breakfasts you have given us. I would like that very much." It was a small exchange, nothing remarkable on its surface, but Jorani felt the weight of it. She was offering him something of her culture, her heritage, and he was accepting it with enthusiasm rather than suspicion. It made her want to offer more, to share all the recipes her grandmother had taught her, all the traditions she had thought lost when her clan scattered. That afternoon, she walked to the bakery after her morning hunting was done, carrying a bundle of ingredients she had gathered from the forest and her own stores. Benedict was cleaning the ovens when she arrived, his face smudged with ash and his sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked up in surprise when the bell above the door chimed. "Jorani, is everything all right? I would like to make you that bread I mentioned if you will allow me to use your ovens." Benedict's face transformed with delight. "Of course. Yes, absolutely. The ovens are yours." He moved aside and watched as Jorani unpacked her bundled dark flour ground from wild grains, molasses traded from a traveling merchant, dried berries she had harvested and preserved, a mix of spices she had hoarded carefully. She had not made this bread in 2 years, had not had occasion or reason to, but her hands remembered the motions as though no time had passed at all. Benedict watched with obvious fascination as she worked. She mixed the flour with water and molasses, kneading it until her arms ached, then adding the berries and spices in careful measures. The dough was dense and dark, almost black, and it smelled rich and complex. "It needs to rest overnight," she explained, covering the bowl with a cloth. "Tomorrow I will shape it and bake it. I will guard it with my life," Benedict promised solemnly, which made her laugh despite herself. She returned before dawn the next morning, alone this time as Della was still sleeping. Benedict was already there, preparing his usual morning breads, and he greeted her with a smile that made her stomach flip in ways she was trying not to examine too closely. Together they worked in the quiet bakery, Benedict tending his loaves while Jorani shaped her festival bread. It felt intimate, this shared silence punctuated by the sounds of their labor, the warmth of the ovens wrapping around them like an embrace. Jorani was acutely aware of Benedict's presence. The way he moved with unconscious grace, the sound of his breathing, the occasional brush of his arm against hers in the confined space. Her bread went into the oven, and they waited, sitting together on the floury work table in the back room. Benedict poured them both tea from a pot he kept simmering, and they drank it while the sky outside shifted from black to gray to pink. "Thank you for this," Benedict said quietly, "for sharing your tradition with me. You shared yours with us first, with me and Della. You opened your door when no one else would have." "I did not do it out of charity," Benedict said, and there was something fierce in his voice. "I want you to know that. I did not invite you in because I felt sorry for you or because I wanted to prove something. I did it because I had been watching you watch, and it was driving me mad, and I wanted more than anything to know you." Jorani's breath caught. "Why?" "Because you looked at this place, at these people, with such longing and such dignity all at once. Because you stood in the cold every morning just to watch something beautiful through glass. Because when I finally met your eyes, I felt something shift inside me." He set down his tea and turned to face her fully. "I have been drawn to you from the first moment I saw you, Jorani. I tried to tell myself it was just curiosity, or loneliness, or any number of other things. But the truth is simpler and more complicated than that. I think I have been waiting for you." Jorani did not know what to say. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "I am an orc," she said finally, stupidly. "You are human. People will not accept it. I know what you are, and I do not care what people accept. I only care what you want." What did she want? The question was enormous, terrifying. She wanted safety for Della, always that first and foremost. But beyond that, beneath that, she wanted things she had tried not to name. She wanted companionship and conversation and the feeling of being seen. She wanted someone to share the weight of her days. She wanted to feel like a woman again instead of just a survivor. And she wanted Benedict specifically, with his kind eyes and capable hands and the way he made her feel like she mattered. "I am afraid," she whispered. "So am I," Benedict admitted. "But I think the scariest thing would be not trying, not knowing what we could be together." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough with calluses from years of kneading dough, and his fingers curled around hers with gentle firmness. Jorani looked down at their joined hands, her green skin against his pale flesh, so visibly different, and felt something loosen in her chest. The timer chimed, announcing the bread was done. They rose together, still holding hands, and Benedict helped her pull the loaves from the oven. The festival bread had turned out perfectly, its crust deep brown and cracked, releasing fragrant steam into the air. The smell was everything Jorani remembered, rich and spiced and full of memory. Benedict cut into one loaf while it was still hot, something Jorani's grandmother would have scolded him for, and tasted it. His eyes closed and a sound of pure pleasure escaped him. "This is incredible," he said. "I have never tasted anything like it. It is like eating history, like every bite tells a story." "My grandmother would have liked you," Jorani said, and was surprised to find tears in her eyes. Benedict set down the bread and pulled her into his arms, and Jorani went, letting herself be held for the first time in 2 years. He was solid and warm, and he smelled like yeast and cinnamon and home, and Jorani pressed her face against his chest and let herself cry for her lost husband, for her scattered clan, for all the lonely mornings standing outside in the cold, and finally, unexpectedly, for happiness, for this moment of perfect connection with a man who saw her as worthy of tenderness. "Stay," Benedict murmured against her hair. "Stay here with me, work in the bakery, share your recipes, let me know you better, let this be the start of something." Jorani pulled back just enough to look up at him. "What about your customers? What about the town? We will figure it out together." And because Jorani had lived too long in fear, had spent too many days protecting herself from disappointment, she decided to be brave. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will stay." The next weeks were both wonderful and difficult. Jorani began coming to the bakery before dawn each day, leaving Della with a neighbor who had warmed to them after seeing the girl at the bakery. She and Benedict worked side by side, and gradually she began to add her own breads to his offerings. The dense hearth loaves of her clan appeared on the shelves alongside Benedict's honey bread. Flatbread studded with herbs joined the croissants and cinnamon rolls. The festival bread, which took 2 days to make, became a special order item. Some customers welcomed the new offerings with enthusiasm. Others complained, muttering about orc contamination and lowered standards. Benedict remained firm in his support, refusing to be swayed by criticism, but Jorani could see the toll it took. His smile grew slightly more strained, and dark circles appeared under his eyes. Money was also becoming an issue, though Benedict tried to hide it. Jorani noticed that fewer customers came through the door than when she had first started watching through the window. She noticed that Benedict sometimes hesitated before lighting all the ovens, as though weighing the cost of the fuel. She noticed that the shelves were less full than they had been, that Benedict was making smaller batches. One morning, she found him sitting at the work table with his head in his hands, a ledger open before him. He looked up when she entered and tried to summon his usual smile, but it was a ghost of itself. "What is wrong?" Jorani asked, setting down her basket of ingredients. "Nothing, just tired." "Did not sleep well." "Benedict." She moved closer, touched his shoulder gently. "Tell me the truth." He was silent for a long moment, staring down at the numbers in his ledger. Then he sighed, a sound full of defeat. "The bakery is failing," he said quietly. It has been failing for months since before I met you. I have been trying to keep it going through force of will and good cheer, but the numbers do not lie. I am losing money every week. Another few months and I will have to close." Jorani felt as though she had been struck. "But the bakery is always busy. There are always customers. Not as many as there used to be. A new bakery opened on the other side of town 6 months ago, bigger and fancier, with more variety. They undercut my prices and people went to them instead. I have been bleeding customers ever since." He laughed bitterly. "And now, with you here, I have lost even more. People who do not want to be served by an orc or eat bread made by orc hands." "Then I will leave," Jorani said immediately, stepping back. "I will not be the cause of you losing your family's bakery." "No." Benedict stood, reaching for her hand. "No, that is not what I am saying. Having you here has been the best thing to happen to me in years. I do not regret it for a moment. I just wish I could give you more, that I was not dragging you down with me." Jorani looked at him, at this good man who had opened his door to her when no one else would, who had defended her against criticism, who had shared his space and his craft and his heart. She thought about the failing ledger, about the empty shelves, about the dying dream. And she thought about her grandmother's words, spoken long ago. A baker does not only feed bodies, she feeds souls. A baker builds community with flour and care. An idea began to form, fragile and hopeful. "Let me see your recipes," she said. Benedict looked confused but pulled out a worn book from beneath the counter, its pages stained with flour and grease. Jorani paged through it carefully, noting the usual offerings, the breads and rolls and pastries that any bakery might make. They were good, she knew, excellent even, but they were also common. There was nothing unique here, nothing that would draw people away from a fancier competitor. "What if we combined our traditions?" Jorani said slowly. "Not just my orc breads on one shelf and your human breads on another, but truly combine them. New recipes that take the best of both. Breads that no one else can make because no one else has this knowledge, this partnership." Benedict's eyes widened. "That could work. If we made something unique enough, good enough, it would not matter what the other bakery offers." They spent the rest of the day experimenting. Jorani taught Benedict the secret of her dense hearth loaves, the long, slow kneading that developed gluten, until the dough was almost elastic. The particular temperature needed to bake them so the crust was hard enough to last for days while the interior remained moist. Benedict showed her his techniques for creating flaky pastry, for coaxing maximum rise from yeast, for balancing sweetness and salt. Together they created something new. A bread that used Jorani's wild grain flour but Benedict's honey and milk. A pastry that wrapped Benedict's buttery dough around a filling of Jorani's spiced berries. A flatbread that combined techniques from both traditions, puffing in the oven like Benedict's rolls but flavored with the herbs Jorani gathered from the forest. They worked through the night, testing and tasting and adjusting. By dawn, they had created a dozen new recipes, each one better than the last. They were exhausted and covered in flour and giddy with possibility. "This could actually work," Benedict said, looking at the results of their labor spread across the work table. "These are good, really good, better than anything I have made before." "Better than anything either of us could make alone," Jorani agreed. They decided to launch the new breads all at once, a grand reopening of sorts. Benedict spent his dwindling savings on materials for signs and extra ingredients. Jorani worked until her arms ached, preparing batch after batch of dough. Della helped where she could, carefully arranging the finished loaves on display shelves, her face serious with concentration. The night before the reopening, Benedict and Jorani sat together in the darkened bakery, too keyed up to sleep. The ovens glowed softly, and the air smelled of all their combined labors. "What if this does not work?" Benedict asked quietly. "What if people still refuse to come because of me?" "Then we will try something else," Jorani said. "We will keep trying until we find what works. I am not giving up on this, on us." Benedict reached for her hand in the darkness, lacing his fingers through hers. "When did you become so brave?" "When I met a man who was brave enough to walk out his door and invite an orc woman inside. You taught me that taking risks can lead to beautiful things." "You are the beautiful thing," Benedict said, and then he was kissing her, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. His hands cupped her face, careful of her tusks, and she wrapped her arms around him, pulling him closer. They kissed until they were both breathless, until the darkness felt full of light, until the fear receded and only hope remained. The reopening day dawned bright and cold. Benedict had posted signs around town announcing the new offerings, and Jorani had made sure every display case was full to bursting with their combined creations. They opened the doors at dawn as usual, and for the first hour, they waited in anxious silence while no one came. Then a few curious customers trickled in, drawn by the signs and the smells wafting from the bakery. They eyed the new breads with suspicion, but Benedict's enthusiastic descriptions and free samples eventually convinced them to try. The first person to taste their collaboration, bread the one made with wild grain, and honey closed his eyes and made a sound of surprise. "This is exceptional," he said. "I have never tasted anything like it." Word spread quickly in the small town. By mid-morning, the bakery was crowded with people wanting to try the new breads. Some came out of curiosity, others because they heard the food was remarkable. Jorani stayed mostly in the back, letting Benedict handle the customers, but she could hear their exclamations of delight, their requests for more. By noon, they had sold out of nearly everything. Benedict came into the back room with a look of stunned joy on his face. "We did it," he said. "They love it. They cannot get enough." Jorani felt relief wash through her, so intense it made her dizzy. "We need to make more." They worked through the afternoon, preparing new batches to bake overnight, but their celebration was cut short when a group of men entered just before closing. Jorani recognized the one in the lead, the owner of the rival bakery, a heavy-set man with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. His name was Thomas Crane, and he had made his disdain for orcs well known in the past. "Heard you had quite a crowd today," Crane said, his voice falsely jovial. "Congratulations on your success." "Thank you," Benedict replied carefully. "Was there something you needed?" "Just wanted to warn you, neighbor to neighbor. People are saying the bread here is not quite right, saying maybe it has been contaminated. You know how folks talk." His eyes flicked toward the back room where Jorani stood frozen. "Might want to be careful about who you let touch your food. Could damage your reputation permanent-like." "The only thing damaging reputations is gossip and lies," Benedict said flatly. "My bread is made with the same care and cleanliness it has always been made with. If you have a problem with my business, say it outright instead of hiding behind rumors." Crane's false smile disappeared. "You made a mistake bringing that creature into your bakery. Mark my words, it will ruin you. People do not want orc hands on their food. I am giving you a chance to correct your error before things get ugly." "Get out," Benedict said, his voice hard as stone. "Get out of my bakery and do not come back." Crane left, but not before shooting Jorani a look of pure malice. After he was gone, Benedict locked the door and turned to Jorani, his face pale with anger and worry. "He is going to make trouble," Benedict said. "He sees us as competition now, and he will do whatever it takes to destroy that competition." "Then we need to be ready," Jorani said, though fear coiled in her stomach. The rumors started the next day. Whispers that the new breads were made with strange ingredients, that orc cooking was unclean, that people had gotten sick after eating at Sawyer's bakery. None of it was true, but truth mattered less than repetition. Jorani saw how some customers hesitated before entering, how they asked pointed questions about ingredients and preparation. Business dropped, not precipitously, but enough to notice. Benedict's jaw grew tight with frustration, and Jorani felt guilt eating at her. This was her fault. If she had just stayed away, stayed outside the glass where she belonged, Benedict would not be facing this. She told him as much one night after they had closed, and he looked at her with such fierce intensity that she fell silent. "Do not ever say that again," he said. "Do not ever suggest that meeting you, knowing you, has been anything other than the best thing in my life. I do not care what Crane says or does. I do not care if we have to fight for every customer. I care about you, about us, about what we are building together. That is worth any amount of trouble. But your bakery is more alive now than it has been in years, because of you. Because of your skill and your recipes and your presence. We will find a way through this, together." Jorani wanted to believe him, but the fear would not let go. She lay awake that night in her cottage, Della sleeping peacefully beside her, and tried to think of a solution. They needed to prove that the rumors were false, that their bread was not only safe but superior. They needed to win back the town's trust. An idea came to her in the dark hours before dawn. It was risky and it would require help, but it might work. She brought her plan to Benedict the next morning. "The harvest festival is in 3 weeks," she said. "There is always a baking competition, correct? Yes, but I have not entered in years. The prize is only a ribbon and bragging rights. But everyone attends. Everyone sees who wins. If we enter our collaboration breads and win, it would prove their quality to the whole town at once. Crane could not spread rumors if everyone had tasted the bread themselves and judged it the best." Benedict's eyes lit up. That could work. "But the judges are all from the town council, and some of them are not friendly to orcs. We would need our bread to be so good they could not deny it. Then we will make it undeniable." They spent the next 3 weeks perfecting their recipes. They tested and adjusted, seeking the perfect balance of flavor and texture. They made bread after bread, giving away what they could not sell to families who needed it, using each attempt as practice. Della helped test the sweeter items, her honest reactions guiding their adjustments. Slowly, through trial and persistence, they created something extraordinary. The festival bread they ultimately chose combined everything they had learned. It used Jorani's wild grain flour and Benedict's techniques for creating air pockets that made the interior light despite the dense flour. It was sweetened with honey and molasses, studded with berries and nuts, flavored with a careful blend of spices. The dough had to be kneaded for nearly an hour to develop properly. Then it rested overnight before being shaped and baked at a precise temperature that required constant monitoring. The night before the festival, they baked their competition loaves together, working in perfect synchronization. Benedict shaped while Jorani monitored the ovens. They did not talk much, too focused on the task, but the silence was comfortable, full of shared purpose. When the loaves emerged, golden and perfect, Benedict pulled Jorani into his arms and kissed her deeply. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said against her lips, "I want you to know that I love you. I have loved you since before I knew your name, since the first morning I saw you outside my window. You have brought light into my life, and I do not want to face another day without you." Jorani's eyes filled with tears. She had not let herself hope that he might love her, not truly, not the way she had come to love him. "I love you too," she whispered. "You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. You gave me hope and belonging and a future. I love you, Benedict." They held each other in the warm bakery while their competition bread cooled on the racks, and Jorani thought that even if they lost tomorrow, even if everything fell apart, she would have this moment. She would have loved and been loved in return, and that was more than she had ever thought to ask for. The festival filled the town square with colorful banners and crowded stalls. Musicians played while children ran between the adults' legs, and the smell of roasted meat and spiced cider filled the air. The baking competition was held in the early afternoon, and by the time Benedict and Jorani arrived with their entry, a substantial crowd had gathered around the judging table. Jorani felt every eye on her as they approached. She wore her best dress, the one with the careful embroidery, and she held her head high despite the whispers and stares. Benedict walked beside her, carrying their bread, his presence a steady anchor. Crane was there with his own entry, a massive cake covered in elaborate frosting. He smirked when he saw them, confident in his victory. The judges, 5 members of the town council, including the mayor, examined each entry in turn. They cut small slices, tasted thoughtfully, made notes. When they reached Benedict and Jorani's bread, there was a moment of hesitation. One judge, an older man, frowned and said something Jorani could not hear. But the mayor, a pragmatic woman named Eliza Vaughn, simply cut a generous slice and tasted it. Her expression transformed. She took another bite, then another, and then she passed the loaf to the other judges with a commanding gesture. They tasted, and one by one, their expressions shifted to surprise and then to something like reverence. "This is remarkable," Mayor Vaughn said loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "I have never tasted bread like this. It is complex and perfectly balanced. The texture is extraordinary. Who made this?" "We both did," Benedict said firmly, his hand finding Jorani's. "It is a collaboration between my techniques and Jorani's traditional recipes. We worked together to create something new." "And you are the orc woman working at Sawyer's Bakery?" the mayor asked Jorani directly. Jorani's mouth was dry, but she managed to answer clearly. "Yes, I am. My name is Jorani Thorne. I am honored that you enjoy our bread." The mayor nodded slowly, then turned to consult with the other judges. The conversation was brief, the decision apparently unanimous. Mayor Vaughn stepped forward with the prize ribbon, a simple blue silk affair, but one that carried weight in the community. "The winner of this year's Harvest Festival baking competition is Sawyer's Bakery for this exceptional collaboration bread. Congratulations to Benedict Sawyer and Jorani Thorne." The crowd erupted in applause, and Jorani felt Benedict's arm wrap around her waist, steadying her as relief made her knees weak. They had won, not just the competition, but something larger. They had proven that their partnership produced something valuable, something worth celebrating. Crane's face was mottled with rage, but there was nothing he could say in the face of the judge's decision. He left quickly, abandoning his elaborate cake on the table. After the official ceremony, people approached to congratulate them and to ask where they could purchase the competition bread. Benedict took orders right there in the square, his voice warm with triumph. More than a few people who had stopped coming to the bakery looked sheepish as they placed their orders, murmuring apologies for believing the rumors. An older woman approached Jorani hesitantly. "I was one of those who said unkind things about you," she admitted. "I let fear and gossip guide me instead of giving you a chance. I am sorry. That bread was the best thing I have tasted in 20 years, and I would be honored to buy from your bakery again." Jorani accepted the apology with grace, though part of her still hurt from the weeks of whispers and suspicion. But she was learning that change came slowly, that winning hearts was a gradual process. Today was a victory, and there would be more tomorrow. The festival continued around them, but Benedict pulled Jorani away from the crowd, leading her to a quiet spot behind one of the stalls. Della was with a neighbor who had offered to watch her during the competition, so they were alone. "We did it," Benedict said, his voice full of wonder. "We actually did it." "You doubted," Jorani teased gently, "maybe a little, but not in us. Never in us." He took both her hands in his. "Jorani, I know we have only known each other a few months. I know there are 100 reasons why this is complicated and difficult, but I do not want to wait. I do not want to spend another day uncertain about where we stand." He dropped to one knee right there in the dirt behind a festival stall, and Jorani's heart stopped. "Will you marry me?" Benedict asked, his honey-colored eyes bright with emotion. "Will you be my partner in the bakery and in life? Will you let me be a father to Della and build a family with you? I love you, Jorani. I want to spend every morning watching you work magic with dough. I want to grow old with you in that bakery, feeding people and building community and being happy. Please say yes." Jorani could barely see him through the tears blurring her vision. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I will marry you. I want all of that, all of it with you." Benedict surged to his feet and kissed her, and Jorani kissed him back with all the love and relief and joy flooding through her. Around them, she heard a few people gasp and murmur, but she did not care. Let them see. Let them know that an orc woman could be loved, could be chosen, could build a life with a good human man. When they finally pulled apart, Benedict was grinning like a fool. "I have one more thing," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple silver ring, slightly tarnished. "It was my grandmother's. I know it is not fancy, but it is perfect," Jorani interrupted, holding out her hand so he could slide it onto her finger. The ring fit as though made for her, and she stared at it through fresh tears, overwhelmed by the symbol it represented. They returned to the festival as an engaged couple, and if some people looked scandalized, many more offered genuine congratulations. Della, when they collected her, shrieked with delight and threw her arms around both of them, chattering excitedly about how Benedict would be her papa now, and they would all live together. And could she help make wedding bread, please, please, please? The weeks that followed were busy ones. The competition victory had brought a surge of new customers, and the bakery was soon thriving again. Benedict and Jorani worked from before dawn until after dark most days, but they did it together, and that made even the exhaustion feel worthwhile. They planned a simple wedding for early winter, after the harvest rush had ended. It would be held in the bakery itself, which felt appropriate, and they would serve their collaboration breads to all who attended. Della was deeply involved in the planning, insisting on helping to bake the wedding cakes and choosing flowers from the last of the autumn blooms, but not everyone was pleased by their success. Crane's bakery continued to struggle, losing customers to the unique offerings at Sawyer's. His resentment grew, visible in the way he glared whenever he passed them in the street, in the dark rumors he continued to spread despite their proven falsehood. One night, a week before the wedding, Jorani woke to the sound of breaking glass. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, and sniffed the air. Smoke. The acrid smell of smoke. She was out of bed in an instant, shaking Della awake. "Get up, quickly. Something is wrong." They dressed rapidly, and Jorani led Della outside, following the smell of smoke toward the town center. Her stomach dropped when she saw orange light flickering in the direction of the bakery. They ran, Della's hand tight in hers, and arrived to find flames already consuming the front of Benedict's building. A small crowd had gathered, some trying to form a bucket brigade from the town well, others just watching in horror. Benedict was there, his face black with soot, desperately trying to save what he could. When he saw Jorani, relief flashed across his features. "Thank God you are safe." I thought you might be inside. What happened? Someone threw something through the window, oil and fire. By the time I smelled it, the whole front room was burning. Jorani looked at the flames devouring their bakery, the place where they had built their love and their livelihood, and felt rage rise in her chest, hot and sharp. This was not an accident. This was deliberate cruelty. She joined the bucket brigade, working with desperate speed to douse the flames. Others joined, more than she would have expected, and gradually they brought the fire under control. By the time the sun rose, the fire was out, but the damage was extensive. The front room was destroyed, the floor burned through in places, the windows shattered, smoke damage throughout. Benedict stood in the ruins, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Everything his family had built, generations of work, reduced to charred wood and ash. Jorani went to him, wrapped her arms around him from behind, and felt him shudder. "We will rebuild," she said fiercely. "We will not let whoever did this win." "I do not have the money to rebuild," Benedict said, his voice hollow. "I spent everything on supplies and the competition entry. I have nothing left. Then we will find another way." But even as Jorani said it, she felt despair creeping in. How could they rebuild with no resources? How could they recover from this? Mayor Vaughn approached, her face grave. "The fire looks deliberate," she said. "We will investigate. But in the meantime, Benedict, I am sorry. The town will do what we can to help." Other townspeople echoed her sentiments, offering aid, but Jorani could see it would not be enough. The damage was too extensive, the costs too high. Then an old farmer stepped forward, a man who had been buying their bread every morning since the competition. "I will contribute timber from my land," he said, "for the rebuilding." "And I will donate labor," said another man, a carpenter. "No charge. You fed my family when times were hard and did not ask for payment. I owe you." More offers came, one after another. A woman pledged coins from her savings. A merchant offered supplies at cost. The neighbor who watched Della volunteered to organize a work crew. Person after person stepped forward, not with pity but with gratitude and respect, recognizing what the bakery meant to the community. Jorani felt tears streaming down her face as she watched the town come together. These people, who had been so suspicious of her mere months ago, were now offering to rebuild the place she and Benedict had made together. The investigation into the fire was brief but conclusive. A witness had seen Crane near the bakery the night of the fire, and oil-soaked rags matching those found at the scene were discovered in his refuse heap. He denied everything, but the evidence was clear. Mayor Vaughn ordered him to pay restitution and banned him from operating a business in Milford. His bakery, already failing, closed within days. Jorani felt no satisfaction in his downfall. She had never wanted to destroy anyone, only to build something good. But she was grimly pleased that justice had been served. The rebuilding took 3 weeks of intensive labor. The whole town seemed to turn out, working in shifts to repair the damage. Benedict and Jorani worked alongside everyone else, grateful and overwhelmed by the support. Della helped too, fetching tools and water, her small face serious with concentration. She had been frightened by the fire, but seeing the community come together to fix it had eased her fears. She talked constantly about how their bakery was going to be even better than before, how everyone would come, how they would make so much bread. As they worked, Jorani found herself talking with townspeople she had previously avoided, learning their stories, making connections. The woman who had complained about her presence that first day apologized again, and shared that her daughter was marrying an elf from the eastern provinces, and she was beginning to understand that love crossed boundaries. The farmer who donated timber told stories about his own parents' human father, halfling mother, and the prejudice they had faced. Gradually, Jorani realized that she was not just rebuilding a bakery. She was building a place in this community, weaving herself and Della into the fabric of Milford in a way she had never thought possible. The bakery reopened the day before the wedding, bright and clean with new windows that let in floods of light. The ovens had survived the fire with only minor damage, and Benedict declared that a good omen. They baked through the night, preparing for the grand reopening and the wedding, filling the rebuilt space with familiar, wonderful scents. The wedding itself was small but perfect. Mayor Vaughn officiated, and what seemed like the entire town crowded into the bakery to watch Benedict and Jorani exchange vows. Della stood between them, holding a basket of dried flower petals that she scattered with great ceremony. Jorani wore a dress she had made herself, deep green to match her skin, embroidered with white thread in patterns from her clan's traditions. Benedict wore his best clothes and looked so handsome, Jorani could barely speak when it was time for her vows. "I promise to stand by you in good times and bad," she said, her voice wavering with emotion. "I promise to knead bread at your side and raise Della with you and build a life that honors both our traditions. I promise to love you with everything I am, for as long as I live." Benedict's vows were similar, spoken in a voice rough with feeling. When Mayor Vaughn pronounced them married, the crowd cheered, and Benedict kissed Jorani thoroughly, to the delight of the audience and Della's giggles. The celebration that followed was loud and joyous. They served their collaboration breads along with traditional wedding cakes, and the bakery was full of music and laughter late into the night. Jorani danced with Benedict, with Della, with townspeople who had become friends. She felt so full of happiness she thought she might burst with it. Late that night, after everyone had left and Della had fallen asleep curled up on a chair, Benedict and Jorani stood together in their rebuilt bakery. The new windows reflected back their images, a human man and an orc woman, hand in hand, surrounded by the tools of their trade. "Do you remember the first morning?" Benedict asked softly. "When I saw you outside the window, I remember, I thought you would send me away. I almost did not come out. I almost talked myself out of it, thinking you would not want to be bothered by a stranger. But I could not stand it anymore, the distance between us. I had to open that door. I am glad you did." Jorani leaned her head against his shoulder. "You changed everything for me. You gave me a home and a purpose and a family. You saw me when I thought I was invisible. You were never invisible to me. You were the brightest thing in my world from the first moment." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight stream through their new windows. Jorani thought about how far she had come from those cold mornings outside, looking in at a life she thought she could never have. She thought about the risks they had taken, the battles they had fought, the community they had built. "What are you thinking about?" Benedict asked, kissing the top of her head. "I am thinking that I am home," Jorani said simply. "Finally, truly home." The seasons turned and their life settled into a rhythm. The bakery thrived, known throughout the region for its unique breads that combined human and orc traditions. People traveled from neighboring towns to purchase their collaboration loaves, and Benedict and Jorani found themselves training apprentices to keep up with demand. Della grew taller and more confident, spending her afternoons in the bakery learning to bake alongside her parents. She had Benedict's easy way with people and Jorani's precise hand with dough, and customers doted on her shamelessly. 2 years after the wedding, Jorani realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had not thought to have more children, had assumed that part of her life was finished. But Benedict was ecstatic, already planning how they would expand their living quarters above the bakery to accommodate another child. When their son was born on a bright spring morning, they named him Brennan, and he had his father's honey-colored eyes and his mother's green skin. He was perfect, and Della insisted on helping with everything, from changing his wrappings to singing him lullabies her grandmother had taught Jorani years ago. Life was not always easy. There were still people who looked askance at their mixed family, who muttered about the unnaturalness of human orc marriages. But they were fewer now, and their voices carried less weight. The bakery had become too important, too beloved, for prejudice to unseat it. Jorani still sometimes caught herself standing at the window, looking out instead of in, remembering those cold mornings when she had been on the outside. But now she did it from a place of safety and belonging, with Benedict's arms around her waist and their children's laughter echoing through the bakery behind them. "What are you thinking about?" Benedict would ask, same as always. And Jorani would turn in his arms, kiss him softly, and answer truthfully. "I am thinking how grateful I am that you opened the door." The years continued their steady progression, marked by the seasons and the rhythms of baking. Della grew into a capable young woman who could run the bakery with minimal supervision, freeing Benedict and Jorani to experiment with new recipes and techniques. Brennan proved to have inherited his mother's keen sense of smell, able to identify individual spices in complex breads before he could properly raid. They had another child, a daughter they named Jessa, who arrived during a snowstorm and proclaimed her presence with such enthusiastic wailing that half the town heard. She was small and fierce, with her mother's pointed ears and her father's stubborn chin, and she approached life with a determination that exhausted and delighted her parents in equal measure. The bakery expanded, taking over the building next door when the seamstress who occupied it retired. They added more ovens, more workspace, and a larger dining area where families could gather. The place that had once been Benedict's lonely inheritance became a bustling center of community life. Other orc families began to settle in Milford, drawn by stories of acceptance and opportunity. Not everyone welcomed them with open arms, but the bakery served as proof that integration was possible, that different traditions could complement rather than clash. Jorani found herself acting as an informal ambassador, helping new arrivals navigate the complexities of human society while maintaining their own cultural identity. Benedict watched his wife become a leader in their community and felt his love for her deepen every day. She had brought so much to his life, not just new recipes and techniques, but purpose and passion, and a sense of building something that mattered. He still remembered that first morning when he had seen her through the glass, and how his heart had known something his mind had not yet understood, that she was meant to be his. 10 years after their wedding, they held a celebration to mark the anniversary. The bakery was packed with friends and neighbors, all eager to wish them well. Della, now 16 and beautiful, made a speech about how her parents had shown her that love could cross any boundary. Brennan and Jessa presented them with a painting they had made together, showing the bakery with its doors flung wide open and people of all races streaming inside. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Benedict and Jorani found themselves alone in the bakery once more, standing at the same window where it had all begun. The glass was clean now, no fog to obscure the view, and through it they could see the peaceful nighttime street. "Do you ever regret it?" Benedict asked, not because he doubted, but because he wanted to hear her answer. "Do you ever wish you had stayed outside, kept yourself safe?" Jorani turned to him, her eyes bright with tears and laughter. "Never, not for a single moment." You opened the door wide and invited me into a life I had never dreamed possible. You gave me everything. You gave me everything, Benedict countered. You saved my failing bakery and my lonely heart. You made me whole. Then we gave each other everything, Jorani said, smiling. And we built something beautiful together. They kissed as they had 1,000 times before, soft and familiar and still electric. Outside, the town slept peacefully. Inside, the ovens banked for the night radiated gentle warmth. And in the space between, in this bakery that had become so much more than a business, an orc woman and a human man held each other and counted themselves blessed beyond measure. The morning would come soon enough, bringing new bread to bake and new customers to serve. But for now, in the quiet hours, they simply stood together in the place they had built. Two people who had found each other across the barrier of glass and fear and prejudice, who had chosen love despite every reason not to, and who had created a legacy that would outlast them both. The door stood open, as it always would, welcoming anyone who needed what they offered. And if, sometimes, Jorani caught sight of another lonely figure standing outside in the cold, looking in with longing, she would go to them as Benedict had once come to her. She would extend the invitation, offer the warmth, open the door wide. Because she knew now what she had not known that first morning, that the greatest gift was not the bread they made or the business they built, but the connection they forged, the community they created, and the simple act of seeing another person and choosing to bridge the distance between you. That was the real recipe, the one worth sharing above all others. And every loaf that came from their ovens, every customer who entered their doors, carried that truth forward into the world. The bakery would stand for generations, a monument to what could be built when courage met kindness, when tradition embraced innovation, when love crossed boundaries that others claimed could not be crossed. And it all began with an orc mother watching through foggy glass, and a man brave enough to open the door wide.